Hey y'all, welcome back. So, it is time to talk axles. As you can see by my plethora of junkyard axles I have sitting here, and hubs, and CVs, and all kinds of stuff, and I have more stashed away under there. Alright, so this is what I've figured out so far from me spending way too much money than I should have on junkyard axles from LKQ, but that's a whole nother rant itself. And LKQ price. Okay, we won't talk about it. So this is what I've collected so far from finding axles in the junkyard, and this is the best solution that I've come up with to find a hopeful, reliable axle solution for a Ford Explorer 8.8 into a Miata. Initially, I went with custom shafts made from 4340 steel that I got a local shop to make that go from Ford Explorer inner tripod, which looks like that deal right there, to Miata outer CV, which, as you can see, since this one is in two pieces, it didn't last very long. The other one is still on the car. That one has not broken, but this one snapped clean in half. And I mean, I wasn't getting on it like I had been, throughout the first week of me having it on the road. It actually snapped from me, rolling into first, hitting rev limiter, and as soon as I shifted into second, then it, boom, shot off like a gun, and that's what happened. So, I honestly think that I might have just got a bad piece of metal. I'm not 100% sure. Just the way that it broke, and the fact that the other one's still in the car, and I've been driving with that. A buddy of mine ended up giving me a Spline Ford Explorer shaft. Shout out to Cameron, and he was awesome enough to let me get that for free. I have that in the car right now, as you can see right there, and it's been holding up. Granted that I haven't been clutch kicking or doing burnouts or anything like that. I have been getting on it though and chirping the tires in third gear. So, I mean, it's still working. I'm actually kind of tempted to just send it in it a few times and see what happens whenever we finally get our version 2.0 axles figured out. But this is a stock Miata shaft right here, as you can see. This right here is my telescoping mock-up shaft that I made just out of a couple pieces of pipe. Once I found the right length, I put some self-tappers in there to hold it in place. This is just to get a measurement. I have a video on how I made this. If you want to do this yourself, you can go back and watch that video. I'm going to use this to find my new length here in just a minute. This shaft right here is a V6 Thunderbird with the 7.5-inch ring gear CV axle. This is what Martin with Monster Miata uses in his setup. His shafts are just like 2 inches shorter than this shaft. Like, it almost worked out from the factory, but as you can see by all these axles here, nobody's come up with a OEM replacement solution. So here we are in the whole custom deal and trying to figure out how to make things work. But Drive Shaft Shop, they use a 31 spline stub shaft on their Ford Explorer axle kit, and then it has like a ball bearing style CV that bolts to that, but it's extremely expensive, and honestly I haven't heard a whole lot of good things about them. I don't have the money to try and buy the axles from them regardless, but that's just what I've heard from a handful of people. This is the V6 T-Bird 28 spline outer CV axle, and that's what I'm more than likely going to end up using. I'll tell you why in just a second. Obviously, this is our stock Ford Explorer shaft. This right here is a 28 spline Lincoln LS shaft. So the Lincoln LS came with an 8-inch ring gear, and it's like, that's the only one I've ever heard of that's independent suspension. It's like really close to working. The only thing is, as you can see, the difference between this one and the T-Bird is the length of the splines, and the actual threads on the nut are a little bit longer. But the biggest issue is just the length of the splines. It will fit on Martin at Monster Miata's broached hubs. As you can see, this is a broached hub next to a stock Miata hub, and he has a really good deal on these. You can buy them brand new for $220, or you can do like I did and send him your old hubs, and he will exchange them with a broach set for $150, and he just threw $20 shipping on there. Super cool guy. Like, the only way you can order anything is to talk to him on the phone, and he'll sit there and chit chat with you. He even you know, tossed up ideas with me about, you know, making some DIY axles and splicing some together. Like, super cool guy. Like, you don't have to spend a whole lot of money with him for him to give you the time of day and sit here and talk cars with you. And he's just all around a very helpful guy. So can't say enough nice things about him. But anyways, I got the broach tubs from him, and the Lincoln LS outer CVs will fit on them. I haven't got it all the way on. It gets kind of tight, but if I put it up next to it, you can see that it like would work. But where the threads are, you would probably have to put like some washers on the end to get it to tighten down. And I really wanted to use these because the diameter of this shaft, as you can see, is a little bit thicker than the V6 T-Bird. So it would be a lot better if I could go from this diameter right here to this diameter right there, and it's not as big of a step down. Plus, obviously, we'd have a little bit beefier axles, but it looks like I'm going to have to use the T-Bird shafts, which there's a 5mm difference if you put a mic on it, and it's not horrible. If we got that big of a difference from Explorer to Miata, and the other one and the Respline one is still working, I think we'll be just fine going from Explorer to T-Bird, but I really wish that would have worked out. And then I had the grand idea of taking the bearings and all that out of the outer CVs and just put this the center part in there that matches the splines and swap them out. But as you can see, that the T-Bird has 6 ball bearings and the Lincoln LS has 8, so that plan didn't work out too well either. Also, if I could have used those, I was planning on maybe just shortening them a little bit and trying to go with the inner CV from the Lincoln LS because it has that ball bearing style on it. But the Ford Explorer, the Torrington bearing on the side of the case that the inner CV rides on is a lot bigger than the Lincoln LS inner CV. So if you put it in there, it's probably got about that much play in it. So that won't work. If that bearing did fit, then you would have to change your side gears to 28 spline side gears, which that's fine. They're interchangeable in an 8.8 carrier. Unfortunately, that would only work in a T-Bird, which, you know, if you're trying to do a 8.8 T-Bird swap, you might be able to figure something out like that and try some Lincoln LS axles. And the V6 T-Bird inner CV is basically the same thing. So they're both 28 splines and they both have the same size bearing inside of the case. Unfortunately, that plan failed as well because I think the main problem that I'm having with my axle solution so far is the Ford Explorer inner tripod bearing. The little caps on the end are popping off. As you can see, the roller bearings are starting to come out. Like, I just plucked one out right there. So I heard a pop the other day when I was downshifting, and then when I shifted into third really hard, it popped again. So I think one of the ones in the car is doing that as well. I don't know if it's just because it's a high mileage bearing or what. I got another set from the junkyard, and I'm going to put those in, and hopefully those will be good to go. We'll see how it goes. I would like to have a ball bearing style joint on the inside, but this is what we have to work with right now until I figure out another solution. Or if you could afford to get the 31 spline stubs, bolt-on style stub that goes into the Explorer case, they're like $600 for 2 of them, I believe I found online. And then you could get a ball bearing style that bolts on and bolt it to that, and then just spline your axles to whatever size that is. So that's another way you can get around it, but as of right now, I can't afford to put too much more money into this, so hopefully this just works out. As long as the axle holds up, I think everything will be fine. The Lincoln LS outer CVs, I actually haven't been able to get those off. I even used this tool right here and put on there and was pulling on it, and it started to bend the tool. I don't know if you can really see it on camera, but T-Bird CVs were the same way, and I ended up getting them off. It took a really long time, but I basically put that puller on there and pulled on it, and I got behind it with a chisel and a hammer and just kept whacking and whacking, and then tightened the nut a little bit more until I finally got it off. And you can see on the end right here, it got a little screwed up from me just kind of disintegrating the snap ring. The part of the snap ring's still in there, but luckily we're not going to have to reuse this shaft, and we got them off, so that's what I'm going to end up going with. I already got this Miata hub pressed out, and I pressed this hub in at work so we can put it in and find our length with the mock-up shafts, and then I'll send these out to Moser and get them resplined. And from what they were saying is that if it's an OEM shaft that came from the factory, it should be heat treated all the way through, so it's not as big of a deal if you're taking a lot of material off. But if you get an aftermarket CV axle from like the parts store or something, there's no guarantee that that's been heat treated all the way through, and I'm pretty sure that's why most people's resplined axles break. So not 100% sure on that, but from the information that I've gathered so far, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Oh, also one more thing. The Lincoln LS axles come with an ABS ring on them. I took it off of that one just so I could get this tool on there because it wouldn't fit on there with it. You just hammer it off. But if you're planning to run a Speedo off of a Hall Effect or Reluctor style setup, you can get the ABS ring off of a Lincoln LS axle, and it'll also fit on the T-Bird axle too, whichever way you decide to go. This is the plan so far, and we're going to get our length of the shafts, drop a little blueprint of how exactly we want them cut and tapered, and send them off and see what happens. So once I get them back, I'll do an update of how they're turning out the car, and I mean basically I'm just going to throw them in and send it and see what happens. So we'll have a video on that too, hopefully sooner than later. I would like to think that they would be back within the next couple weeks. They said that their turnaround time is normally a few days, and with shipping and all that, I'll probably have them in a week, so that's pretty cool. All in all, it's going to be somewhere around like $300 altogether, I'm thinking, to get the shafts resplined, snap ring grooves cut, and tapered down. So we'll see how shipping ends up. More than likely, this is going to be a somewhat affordable solution for our DIY budget LS Miata swap. So I'm about to get this thing in the car and find our measurement and get these axles sent out. Alright, so you can see what I got going on here as far as measuring my length with the mock-up shaft. Basically, you just want to measure from the end to your snap ring groove, and then I wrap tape around this bar to make it fit snug, and then I just put hose clamps as a stopper once I got it in position exactly where I wanted it to be on the CVs and the bearing here, and just put it in the car, manipulate the travel, and make sure everything's good there. Really what you want to do is just bring the hub up to where it's completely level, like the shaft is level straight across, and that's going to be the longest part. So when you go up or down, the shaft is going to get shorter. There's a whole lot of play in this Explorer Inner, because obviously it was on an SUV, that you're not going to use like at least like 4 inches or something like that. It'll go in. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to make this a little bit longer and have it set in a little farther, because it was right on the edge. And I'm not 100, I mean it worked, but I'm not 100% sure if that's adding to why that these inner tripod bearings are wanting to come apart. As you can see, like the little snap rings, locking, retaining clips, rings, whatever they are holding them in, are coming out, and the rollers are wanting to fall out. The one that I just took out of the respline shaft, those are together, but I need to check the other side that was on the custom shaft I had made, because this one came apart on that custom shaft, so I think that might be what's popping. I don't know, I'll just take it apart and see. Another thing I forgot to add was the V6 T-Bird tripod bearings. You can't just swap them out, because you can see they're different sizes. The Explorer's a whole lot bigger, different spline, and as well as the Lincoln LS with the ball bearing style, it's got a different spline in there too. It comes really close to fitting, but it doesn't. So unfortunately, you can't just swap CVs out. It's not that easy, which I was hoping it might be, but can't get that lucky. So I'm not going to go into huge detail on how to make the mock-up shafts, because like I said, I have a video dedicated to that. And if you want to see exactly how I made the little bar, which is not very complex, you can go watch that video. So I'm going to throw it in there, see where it needs to be, and we're going to get our link from there. Okay, so you can see the general idea of what I have going on here. Initially, I left the boot on there, and if you're doing this at first, you can line the boot up to where it was on the original shaft, on your mock-up shaft, and then just kind of stick it on the inner CV and see where that ends up. This time around, I took it off, and I mean, it's not going to hurt to actually look and see where your bearing's going to end up at in the CV. So you can see that I have, well, you can kind of see through all that CV grease that I have the bearing in there recessed a little bit. So I have the self-tappers out so I can play with the position of it. So when I had the Explorer to Miata shafts in here, it was like right on the edge. That's where this boot wants it to be. But when it flexes like maxed out, like you can like see one of the bearings like kind of out. It still works, but I just don't like how that is, like how that shaft is sitting over there at an angle. When it's like that, it's like one of the bearings at the top, you can kind of see it, like, you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm thinking I want to push this in just a hair. And really, it's where I had it for the other shafts, I got a little line drawn on there, and you can see the holes line up. But I think I'm just going to push it in just a little bit more, just to get a little more bearing clearance. It's kind of funny, it ended up about the same spot. Of course, you know, the outer CVs aren't too much different, so it's not going to be a whole lot off. Really, it would work if I just went with 18 inches, but I'm thinking maybe like 18 and a quarter or something like that, bring it in just a hair. I don't know if 18 and a half would be too much, but I mean, you see how much play you actually have in the thing. There's CV grease in there, so see, that's all the way in right there. So you have a whole lot of real estate to work with right here. I think I'm just going to bring it in just a little bit. I'm thinking like maybe 18 and a quarter. So that's what I'm going off of with mine. And I mean, you could set this to where the boot would be, which would be like right there, which really isn't that bad looking at it straight on. Also, I have it leveled out. That's going to determine your length of the shaft with the bearing out as far as possible during normal travel. When the suspension goes up or down, the CV is going to be pushed in just a little bit. That's where you really want to take your measurement from. Just put a jack under it like I did and get it level, and then see what you got from there. So that's basically it as far as finding a link for your custom axles goes. Another thing I just learned when using the V6 T-Bird outer CV on the Miata hub, the T-Bird CV comes with a seal on the CV itself. And then you knock that off, and then you want to take the seal that comes in the Miata hub, knuckle, whatever you want to call it, you want to take that out too, or it binds down. So you don't need to run seals. The thing fits in there perfect, so you really don't even need a seal. This is like a match made in heaven, dude. Like, I'm sure when Martin figured this out, he was like, oh my god, it's perfect, but that's pretty awesome. It's like it was meant to be. I guess that's all I really got for this video as far as, you know, information that I've found so far on a feasibly obtainable DIY axle solution. And we're going to get these shafts sent out, and obviously we'll have another video when they get back of how they worked out. Hopefully it'll just be a video of me doing some donuts. So as always, if y'all made it this far into the video, you're the real MVPs. And thanks for watching. I appreciate y'all subscribing. We'll see y'all in the next one. Later, y'all.